Stand for a moment of silence, followed by the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have a roll call of the members?
Dr. Malloy.
Here.
Mr. Mignon.
Here.
Mr. Hoff. Mr. Greenwood. Mrs. Irwin Adams. Mr. Johnston. Mr. Francis. Mrs. McGinnis. Mr. Cook.
Okay. We'll start out with our special presentation on budget and finance.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Nick will cue up the PowerPoint on the screen behind you or in front of you, depending on which way you're facing. And then you also have a packet at your table. Tonight, we are going to wrap up and review our previous presentations. We've been asked a couple of questions from various members of the board. One was regarding distressed districts. Another has been about the sixth grade, some of the expenses in the sixth grade league. So we have a little bit of a mishmash of information for you. At your desk at your table with the presentation is a little 2-page summary of the first page shows the revenue for the sixth and seventh grade leagues. And the second page shows the expenditures and specifically event workers. It shows the actual expenses for 2021 in the right column, and in the middle column is last year's. And then the far left column are the expenditures or revenues to date. And my understanding for this year is those leagues and games just got started. So there's not much going on this year yet.
Okay, so I think I maybe didn't relay it correctly, but I was actually wondering for the junior high, not for the weekend leagues. So the junior high, the amount that we pay the event workers to work all the junior high games.
Okay, I will have that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. This was a good exercise too. This has these sixth grade leagues haven't been in formation, but for a couple of years. And when they were first presented, they were to pay for themselves, and they actually are. We are making money on those, the sixth and seventh grade league, but I can get the information.
I am happy to have this, but we don't have as many workers for those games as we do for like a regular junior high game, like after school. So that's my concern, that we have a lot of additional event workers that we don't
I can get
need.
that information. One thing that has been an issue for various board members over the years is that we have ticket sellers and we have ticket takers. And you will hear when we have our audit report, we will have audit findings this year. And one of them is in with athletics. And it's dealing with a lot of cash. And so it's important that we have controls over the tickets, like rolls of tickets. This ticket seller has this number to this number, then a separate ticket taker who has nothing to do with the money is at the door.
So I understand that, but like when I go to a junior high, both soccer and basketball, because I'm at them frequently. So at the soccer games, we have 3 people stationed along the field, okay, that we're paying for crowd control. There's barely any people there, and nobody's rushing the field. Or, I mean, I understand that you have to have some people for security reasons, but in the same with like the junior high basketball games, and other people have said things to me. You walk, there's the ticket seller, the ticket taker. Right next to the ticket taker is a security, like one of the people that's, an event worker doing like security or crowd control. Then there's one at like each corner of the court. Well, no one even goes down to the far side of the court. So I just, and they're not that well attended. I mean, they're like BG. Today we played BG. That's the most well attended. But aside from that, there aren't that many people. So I don't know that we need that many on crowd control.
I'll get the expenditures for you, and we may have to ask Phil to come in to address how the number of officials and event workers are there. But that was not on the agenda for tonight. I just wanted to get that one addressed here at the
I
beginning.
appreciate it. I'm sorry I wasn't clearer.
That's
So.
okay. So Nick has us queued up for meetings tonight and moving forward. Tonight, we're going to ask for direction regarding reductions. Starting in March and April, we'll be working on the preliminary budget for next year, and we'll be having those discussions with you. In May, we'll need approval for the preliminary budget and then final approval in June. Tonight, we're going to just do a quick summary of some of our previous finance presentations. We've also had questions about how we are using the ESSER funds. So we have some slides to lay that out for you. Sue and I worked to come up with as realistic a projected operational deficit as possible at this point in the year. We will update that every month moving forward as we get one more month's worth of expenditures and revenues and get another month closer to the end of the fiscal year. And then we'll also use that information moving forward for next year's budget. We will review some of the programs for cuts. And then we were also asked about the distressed districts. What did their statistics look like before they went into distress? And Sue did an awesome job of researching that, and she's pulled together some slides that will be at the end of this presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So just a quick review of some of our previous presentations. In September, we looked at student activities that included athletics, arts, music, drama, and clubs, and they comprise only about 1.5% of our total expenditures. Then in October, we looked at maintenance and custodial and building expenditures, and they are less than 10% of our total expenditures. Then at our last meeting in January, we looked at our contractual obligations that include salaries and benefits and transportation and retirement. And that is the bulk of those are the bulk of our expenses, 81% of our expenses for 2021. We also talked in September about some of our statistics comparing us with other districts in the state. And just as a refresher, we are in the top 6% in the size of our enrollment, 32 out of 499 districts. But our per pupil cost is in the lowest 5% of the state. We are 475th out of 496 districts at $15,958 per student. Our employee cost, our per employee cost, we are in the lowest 10% of the state, 440 out of 496. And then our salary expense per pupil, we're in the lowest quarter of the state, 387 out of 496. These keeping our costs so low and being so low compared to other districts, I think is a good indication of the previous cuts that we put in place, and just demonstrating how we're trying to get the biggest bang for the buck.
Why is the salary expense per pupil in the lowest 25 and the other ones are in the 10 and the 5? Shouldn't they all be about the same? Like, if our per pupil cost is in the lowest 5%, why isn't the salary expense per pupil in the lowest 5%?
This is driven by contracts, teachers' contracts, athlete contracts. Quite simply, when you're talking about contracts, you have things that
they're beyond our control. I mean, we negotiate the contract, but you also on the other side of the table when it comes to contracts. And at this point, I'm just saying that our contracts are not as low. That's one of the drivers, one of our expenses that we have. Like if you look at how we're in 5% and 10%, but then you realize that our contracts are actually driving us up.
Right, but I thought when we have the contract negotiations, I thought the teachers union is always saying they're one of the lowest paid in the state and all that.
As far as contracts, I think we're probably around the way this is saying we're 25, we're
Right.
halfway up, halfway in the bottom, below the median. So understand it's not, when you're dealing with contracts and contract costs, it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily want to be on the bottom of the basket. I mean, Cambria County, I know schools in Cambria County have starting salaries of $10,000 below us. And they also have multiple teaching positions that are still open at this point in time. They can't get anybody.
Okay.
There's a point where the market drives that. And while I think our county as a whole is very solid, and we're not high in comparison, but at the same time, you have to realize that your cost of teachers some of that's beyond our control.
Oh, that's, so, I mean, the cost per teacher and the cost for these contracts, literally, that becomes like a competitive marketplace situation. And while our other costs per student are low, when you look at it, one of the things that's driving our cost per student and our cost for employees up is probably our salaries and our salaries in comparison to the region that are competitive.
Part of it also is the fact is our high special ed population. So in smaller districts, they don't have a one-to-one. You've got a teacher in a classroom, then you may have 2 or 3 special ed aides in a classroom as well. That will drive up your costs. And we're not at our full capacity for special ed aides, but we should have around 150. It's well over $1 million, and other districts don't have that same. Some do, but most don't.
And that's correct. Where we have I believe the number we were looking at the other week was like 115 special ed teachers. And that doesn't include your aides. It's saving us a chunk of money because we brought all those things in house, but it also messes with your ratios because you've got a maximum number of students. If it's an autistic classroom, it's 8. If it's an emotional support classroom, it's 8. Life skills, I think, is 15. Is that about right, Michelle? Or is it 20? Life skills. 12 in the elementary. So with those state and federal mandated caps, you're automatically going to have a higher student teacher, a higher ratio of teachers to students, which is again going to drive up your salary expense.
Can I offer something? So I know we've looked before at the comparison of some of our key administrative employees, their salaries as they compare across the state. An interesting ratio for me would to be the amount of the ratio of salary of student-facing staff versus administrative staff. And, in my field of expertise, which is healthcare, I'm overhead, right? I don't generate any revenue. I don't touch patients. I don't deal with patients, but I'm overhead. So, that's one of the things we always looked at in my field. So I think it'd be helpful, and I don't know if there's any comparison statewide of ratios of administration salary versus teacher aide salary. Just to give us some sense, so far of all the comparisons we've done, I think it's reflected well on the fiscal management here, but it would be just another piece of the pie to me to be able to say we're in line with what other people are spending. I would assume we are, or less, but it would be helpful.
I'll go on here, get the mic turned on. I'll probably be asking you some questions, Michelle. For one thing, how many students do we have requiring a one-to-one nurse? 3 or 4. Okay. How many multi-handicap classes do we have? 3. Okay. Do we have classes for the visually impaired, or is that still through the IU? Hearing impaired? Not classes, but supports. Okay. And with some of our children who have more significant behavioral issues, how many are in those classes with, and how many staff members? Okay. And one of the things way back, I've been dealing with special ed many, many years. We used to base the budget on an excess cost formula, which was extremely complicated. And thank goodness you don't have to deal with that today. But with these children with more significant handicaps, you have fewer students in the class. You'll have a teacher. You'll also have numerous assistants. So you may have 6 children or 7 children and 7 adults. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand that. And that's the cost of special education. And when you're in a larger district like Altoona, you have more of these situations where you need more personnel. I know I was involved at Spring Cove. I don't think they even had a multi-handicap class. Their students went to another district. And that was the origination of the IUs, to handle these low incident populations that required a lot of adults to work with them. So when you look at the cost of special ed, it's not just the number of pupils enrolled in special ed. It also needs to take into consideration the handicapping conditions the students have and the number of personnel that are needed to provide an appropriate education for the children. And it's a very costly thing. If you have 3 to 4 students needing a nurse, what do you pay for a nurse? You could probably see the same per pupil costs of kids going to Harvard or Yale. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's a mandated program, and it's like you can't cut the cost. In fact, they always seem to increase. Right. So I just thought we needed to look at that also.
Thank you. The next slide is an overall summary of our use of ESSER funding. So ESSER 1 was primarily spent in 2021, and it was closed. It ended in September. We completed the final expenditure report. We received all those funds. We're closed out with it. ESSER 2, the total is 11.9 million. We are spending some of it this year, spreading it out into next year, and then it ends in September of 23. ESSER 3 is broken into 2 components. It's one grant, but they required us to set aside 20% of it for learning loss. So it's a total of a $24 million grant, but 19 million of it is more at our discretion, if you will. And the 20% set aside has strings attached. We've been using it for summer school, for curriculum, enhancements with curriculum. That digital curtain that the board approved for the stage is going to enhance instruction. That's coming out of that 20%. So in 21, 22, those are the actual amounts we spent in those various ESSERs. There are some peripheral, smaller federal funding, but I didn't get into that. We're focusing on our major fund balance saving ESSERs. For 22, 23, we're estimating that we will spend around 13 million this year and then have 13 million next year left out of ESSER 3. There is some talk about possibly extending our ability to spend it, but it's not firm. It's nothing that we can really count on at this point, but we'll keep you posted if that changes. But at this point, it would run out in September of 24 and would have to be closed and we would have to be done. So the details on each one of them follow. ESSER 1 was 2.5 million. It was primarily spent in 2021. We spent it on our internal cyber salary and benefits. You may remember that in the height of COVID, we had, the board approved that we would give employees paid time off without having to take their sick leave. And it fell under emergency paid leave. It was going to be a district expense, but we were able to take it out of ESSER 1. That totaled 191,000. We also used 400,000 of it to cover the maintenance at the secondary, at the junior high. You may remember that we had fourth and fifth grade classes. Is that right, Haley? We had some elementary programs coming into the junior high to try to get face-to-face, but keep them as small a class size as possible. And so that allowed us to get approval from PDE to use those salaries to keep that facility clean. We also purchased almost $1 million worth of hotspots and devices, as a lot of the instruction was virtual that year. That all seems like it was a long time ago, and it's a bad memory now. Summer school, we started ramping up our summer school that first year. Our normal summer school expenditure is around 45,000, but we opened it up to everyone and expanded it, and we used another 153,000 for summer school. And then in ESSER 1, the state required us to carve out part for non-public, and their share was 54,000. In fact, they are the reason why our spending went into the next couple of years, because they didn't spend their money. We were done. We had to wait for them to finish spending theirs. So ESSER 1 is done. ESSER 2, we are in the middle of spending. We are using it to cover CTC costs, some of our STS, our substitute costs, technology, still enhancing our devices, making sure we have hotspots, keeping technology running as at its peak. We're covering our ACA for 2 years.
I understand with technology, normally we'd be buying replacement Chromebooks, et cetera, and equipment. It would be coming out of our regular budget. We supplanted that with the ESSER 2 monies to cover that. So it took relief off of our budget. Right.
We also built in 4 window projects. 2 are in ESSER 2, Juniata and Juniata Gap, although Gap may end up coming out of 3. We have to do some budget revisions, but currently this was what was approved by PDE. And then we had the planetarium projector in there as well. ESSER 3 is the next page. The 19 million that's more that's more flexible for us out of the 24 million will be covering the CTC in the third year. And we are using it to cover secondary electives, salary and benefits, also more technology, covering the third year of ACA salary and benefits, the third year of substitute teacher services, then finishing out window projects at, I said 4, it's actually 5, McAuliffe Heights, Ebner, and Penn Lincoln, and then we used it for the retention bonuses. Then the next page is the 20% set aside, the mandatory set aside. We are using some of it for summer school, curriculum, that digital stage projector that the board approved, and then musical instruments, those sousaphones. And I have to admit on that one, I couldn't remember the exact amount. I thought it was around 80. So that's the summary of how we are using the ESSER funds and trying to use them to be good stewards of that money, to get as many services to our students as possible, to try to enhance our programs and provide as many materials and licenses and interventions moving forward into the future as we possibly can. And having said all that, the next slide shows what we have worked on as a potential operational deficit. And when I say operational deficit, this is what is it going to look like if we didn't have ESSER money. And our best estimate as of today, February 6th, 2023, is an operational deficit of $5,600,000. We're going to show you in a later slide some recommended cuts or support that could enhance the budget by another $438,000, which would bring the operational deficit down to 5.1. And then the increasing to the index, that 5.9% index would bring in 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million. So the potential could be that the operational deficit could be cut to about 3.6 million. Please note on these assumptions, we did receive increased state funding. This would be based on continued higher levels of state funding. Our healthcare is leveling off somewhat this year. It's still higher than we want it to be, but it's better than at this point in the year. It's better than it was last year at this point. That could blow up before the end of the year. That's why we will be reviewing it every month, and we'll be letting you know where we stand every month. And when I say looking at our expenditures month by month, healthcare is in my mind one of our biggest wild cards, because one or two high claims that could occur in 1 month, and it could change the outlook.
I asked this before, and I don't think I ever got an answer. If we reduce the discount that you get for paying your property taxes early, how much revenue could that generate? Like, what's the discount now?
Thank you, I missed the button. The discount's 2% if you pay it before the 1st of September. I have not quantified it. I know you've asked that before, and I'm sorry, I have not done that. Let me get that number to you.
Okay.
We're also seeing and expecting growth in business privilege and mercantile taxes. Those returns aren't due until May, and we'll give you updates there as well.
Another question I asked, and I didn't think I got an answer. The State College and Huntington, they both they keep $5 out of the LST. They don't give the full money, the full amount back. And how much would that generate if we kept $5 like the other areas, of the $52. They don't give back the full 52 if you don't make 10,000. They keep 5 for the school district.
First I've heard of this. You mentioned this prior.
Yes.
Yeah. We do keep money out of the LST. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I can get you the line item revenue for the LST tax.
Okay, the next page gets us into our recommended expenditure reductions and additional potential sources of revenue for next year. We plan to reduce the high school budget by 10%, the junior high budget by 10%, and other department budgets, 45,000, 33,000, 30,000 cuts. We are discussing the possibility and options for relocating staff at the CTC. Currently, we pay around $27,000 to the VOTEC for our office space there. There are a handful, I think 4 technology staff there, and then our security department is there. In addition, since we have staff there, we are renting the blue lot from St. Mary's, and that's another $3,000 plus dollars. So the total savings every year would be around $30,000 if we can relocate those staff members to other areas, and we're exploring that. And so that would be an annual savings.
Wait, so you're saying the staff members that are located there, like security, and that you'd relocate them to some other facility that we own and not?
We are looking at potential for the COP building. We're looking at potential for what we may be doing differently at Adams, and how we're allocating our people. The reason is simple. It's $30,000. It's a savings. Well, before everybody gets ecstatic that we're going to be able to save this, this is like in its fledgling stages, and there are some issues with just having space. You know, selling the old Kimmel building and selling Wright were the right moves. At the same time, we don't have surplus buildings like we did. I mean, I don't know how many roll-off dumpsters we emptied out of the Wright building, but you know, I sent a note out to the board talking about the fact that we need to seriously look at getting a forklift for fur. And the reason is simple, because it's our warehouse and we have to maximize the warehouse. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you can stack things vertically just as much as you can stack them on the floor. So, I mean, we're working on this because, again, we want to maximize every space that we have. We had people in the COP building where they are now in the rebuilt suites in the basement of the DAO, so the district offices. We are then looking at, okay, how do we want to use that building? And we're trying to figure this out. We're gonna have some discussions this week about, you know, can we not rent the CTC, because it is an expense, and if we can maneuver around that, it might be worthwhile to us in the long run. Yes. The reality is, if we spend $30,000 over there, if we don't spend that $30,000, we're going to spend 15. So it's 50 cents on the dollar worth of savings. But at the same time, if we have the ability to maximize space, we want to take it. Absolutely, we want to keep them on site. And again, we're just starting to have this conversation, so it's premature to say how that's going to work out. It's just taking a look at options.
That's my understanding. When our offices were temporarily located over there, is from Danielle, they were hurting for space, and they were precluded from expanding their programs because they didn't have, now that could have changed and I could have misunderstood, but that would free up space for them if they did want to add another class of some type. And it's a nice classroom and office space. One of the other topics that we had talked about as a possibility is hiring a grant writer, and an outside grant writer could bring in outside grant revenue for programs that we want to have supported. In my mind, I'm thinking the safety and security, right now there's a lot of safety and security money. If we could get some of our security covered, there are a lot of opportunities out there, and I think conservatively they would have could bring in a net revenue of additional $300,000. So we're estimating that the total budget support would be $438,000.
And I think writer, basically federal program office, and then they bring in other people. Yes, they did.
We did.
And I know even from the departments I work with, we got a $5 million grant to the U.S. Department of Education. We sold a couple of the FM frequencies that we owned for $1 million. I think it was 1.2 million, and that went into the general budget. I know different things we got for special ed to start up different programs. There are those monies out there, but you have to look for them. You have to go after them.
So the next slide has some cuts that have been, and reductions that we have done in the past that had far-reaching implications that we do not recommend. And some of these we had brought up in previous budget meetings several years ago, that again, we are not recommending this. $200,000 to the library. They're an important piece of our community, and our support is critical for their well-being.
I was at the library in December, and I was there from 9 in the morning till about 5:30 in the evening. And there's not that much traffic going through the library. I understand we need it, but is there any thought to carving out some more office space that we could generate revenue off of some of that library space? Maybe consolidate a little bit more. I know the children's area, that's always busy, but the upstairs, it's more of a community room than it is a library. There's people playing chess, there's people doing interviews. It was actually not very, for me studying, it was kind of disruptive. And I thought maybe make a community room and maybe consolidate some of those books, like the stacks, because there's really nobody, when I was in there, there's really nobody going through that. It was mostly, people doing other stuff. And I didn't know if there's any possibility of generating revenue through the library just because that building's so big.
Well, we're already using CareerLink, and we're using that to defray upkeep costs. We've done a lot of things that you don't notice right away, but we've done a lot of updates and that kind of thing on top of what we had to do because of the flooding. And the last couple of pieces are those ceiling grates that are going to be getting done here shortly. And there is potential space. The question there is, because we're not the only people involved with that. Yes, it's our building, but the library has things to say about what they can use and can't use, or what they can maximize effectively. So opportunities could be created. And you're right, there may be some potential spaces we can use in there, but the reality is, for me, I have to talk to them to coordinate what we want to do or not want to do with the library. And likewise, I don't think that we would be able to use it for excess office space, whereas we do have other buildings with that potential. And we are in the process of talking to CareerLink about how much space they actually need, because they may need more. And if they need more, we can have that discussion with them. But again, it's you can't always guarantee that.
And I think those of us who've been on the library board could tell you that the monies the school district budgets for the library are used as matching funds. And basically, I asked Jennifer Nicely way back, what would happen if we would pull the Altoona School District funds? And it would cut their monies. They, like 1 year here, 2021, they would lose potentially $432,661. Okay, so their budget would be reduced to $124,000. They would have to cut hours, they would have to cut staff, and I think we're doing a tremendous service to the community and the school district supporting that library. And I think without the school district support, it wouldn't be the library it is. And being a community member, I would not support taking the monies from the library. And a lot of the other board feels.
Another potential cost savings that we don't recommend is putting limits on Mansion Park hours. We could save approximately $50,000 or more shutting Mansion Park down in the winter, where we didn't have to keep it clean and safe. We don't recommend that. It's part of our community. It's a community gem, and it is used by the community. Another thing we've brought up in the past, and we don't recommend it, is eliminating meal money. That would save us $55,000. We have a lot of poor kids, and there may be ways that we can provide meals for away trips rather than the $5. That's 11,000 fives right there that have passed through hands back and forth. We have talked about it, and we can look at that again on a more efficient way of being able to get kids some food when they're on away trips.
And we are, as we bring this up, just give everybody an idea. I had the dental emergency, so I'm running out to the dentist, and on the way back, I'm stopping at Wendy's for I got their number one meal, their burger, and I got a bill for $10.55. It's a burger, fries, and a drink. It's not exactly top of the nutrition chain, and at the same time, it's we're talking about we support Leo Money with $5 a kid per event. That's actually helping defray the pain to the parents. It's not really making a complete impact. Now we have coaches that are doing different things, and they're pooling that money, and they're buying pizzas or they're buying hoagies, and they're doing it differently to maximize those dollars. And we are getting a lot of bang for our buck. At the same time, understanding our free and reduced population, it's a big positive impact for those kids participating, and likewise, it makes it is a plus for those kids, and it's a plus for the district. Again, these things we don't recommend, but at the same time, we're throwing it out there because you've got to be aware we've looked at this budget, and we've looked at it very seriously about what needs to be kept and maintained, and what can be looked at for reductions and cost savings.
Are there rules associated with like the distance involved to get meal money? Like, okay, because if going to State College, I'd rather get home and then stop and get a meal.
It's based on mileage. Like I know when they go to Bedford, they don't stop. When they go to State College, they do. But you have to consider sometimes there are 2 or 3 games. So they're there for, sometimes
Hours.
they're not getting home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So
Okay, I mean, it's a 40-minute drive now, and you could eat within, I'm just saying, if
Well,
It seems-
sometimes they'll, like, when they have like 2 basketball games, sometimes they'll have pizza delivered to the school so kids can eat while other kids are playing, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm just saying it is a long day if they don't get to eat.
And I believe they also, Phil has explained this one to me before too, that they give them the money, and it may be for them to go to the concession stand while they're there after their game. And whatever that
Okay.
$5, it wouldn't necessarily be very nutritious, but
Just as an aside, we were talking about this weekend. When I was in school, you got the same amount, the $5. And we had kids that would take half home and only spend half so that they could help supplement their family on the weekend. So, I mean, I know like it is a small amount of money, but some kids do use it for other purposes, and it's a positive thing.
Another one, reducing instructional programs. We could cut programs. We don't recommend it. Depending on what you cut, could save 1 or 2 positions and the materials for it. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we had our child care development class at the high school. Several of the teachers retired at the same time, and that was the opportunity to, and it was a career and tech program. We eliminated that, and those students that took those classes then have to find something else to take. And so it puts more of a strain on some of the other classes. It also eliminated a child development certificate, pre-certificate they could get as through the career and tech program. So
The key you have to realize is like our biomed, how many kids are in our biomed program?
170, 180 right now.
You have 180 kids in a biomed program. If we don't have that program and we eliminate that teacher and teacher and a half, we're at least going to have to add 1 teacher somewhere else because they teach 6 classes at 25 kids in a class. That's 150 kids. That's 150 seats. So it's one of these things when you look at some of these programs and you say, well, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut that. Well, you eliminate that program, those kids have to go somewhere. And so you reach that point where the efficiency actually costs more than the program. Because I know we were talking at one point when we were having the discussions about refurbishing the planetarium and redoing that system. How many kids are in that program?
He'll run 300 kids a year through astronomy.
I mean, he'll run 300 kids through that program in a year. Well, that's 300 kids at is it a half credit course? So you're talking 150 kids first semester, 150 kids second semester. You'd have to replace them somewhere else. Because just the nature of the fact that kids are going to need to be in class. And some of these things just they look really good on paper, but when it comes down to saving money, they don't generate the savings. Now, when we eliminate positions because the school is just getting smaller and we use attrition, yeah, those savings generate. But we just did a major reduction when we opened this building, and likewise, we are continually assessing what we need to do in the elementary. But other things happen where, yeah, we might eliminate 2 or 3 positions because we don't have the kids, but then we have to pick up a special ed classroom, or we have to pick up another classroom. So that kind of becomes it's a constant finding of efficiencies. So, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it never generates the savings we want it to generate because there's always something.
there's always another shoe that will drop. And when we're trying to create programs that will bring students back, and we want students to be engaged, we need as much variety and something that will appeal to them to come back. Principals sharing buildings. We've done this before, did not work out very well. And I bring these up as a point of information to you that we have considered these. Some of these we have done. We've lived through them. We know the pitfalls. And principal sharing buildings, we didn't really save as much as we thought, because then we'd have to hire a lead teacher in each of the buildings to cover when the principal is bouncing back and forth between buildings. It just wasn't very, it didn't work out very well.
I taught in a building one of the years that we did the principal sharing, and that is definitely not something I would recommend.
The other thing there is, when you look at our number of students per principal, we are way above the average. When I made the comparison during the State of the Union in December, talking about the number of principals we have in the junior high versus the number of principals that another local school district right down the road has. And they have 700 kids with 3 principals. We have 1,600 kids, 1,700 kids with 4 principals. The reality is, not having that kind of coverage and that kind of supervision to appropriately run the building and maintain discipline, maintain the communications with parents and community, you're flirting with disaster. And all it takes is one court case, one lawsuit where something happened that you don't have the proper supervision to oversee and prevent, and any savings you have is gone for the next 10 or 15 years.
And nurses split between buildings. Stephanie, you may have lived through that one too. That is with all the medical needs that our students have. It's not safe, in my opinion. It's not safe for the kids, and it's not a good idea for the district. Closing the swimming pool, that could save money, but again, that's another gem that we offer and attracts students, and we believe it's important. Transportation is not required, but how are the kids going to get to school? If we think our attendance is bad now, don't offer transportation, but it would save all that money. So again, things we've looked at, but it's really not the answer.
Well, and it's not really that we're helping Amtran. We have a mutually beneficial partnership with Amtran, because they're giving us a steady quality transportation for our students, so we can get them to the buildings and get them to the buildings safely. But at the same time, we're making sure they have enough volume to effectively keep that transportation system running. Yes.
Yeah, we have Amtran transports for 3 of our elementaries right now: Ebner and Juniata and Pleasant Valley. It was just an efficiency. The price per vehicle on an Amtran vehicle compared to our yellow buses is very, very similar. So to be able to double stack and get the most out of the vehicle, because we pay a per day rate. So if we can do 2 runs per day using vehicles, it's more efficient and more cost effective.
Yes.
Every one of them, yes.
They're all double stacked.
I was approached by this because I guess there was some thought that hopefully we had the kids were outside down in Indiana.
Yeah, the vehicle broke down.
Right.
Yeah.
So they weren't notified they're standing outside the pool. But that's why I thought the secondary should be transported by and not the elementary. Just my personal opinion.
The limit on Amtran is the number of buses they have available. I mean, literally, I believe we're using 6 Amtran buses, or is it higher than that now? 8. But they're running double runs, because they are transporting the high school and junior high school kids, and then they do an elementary run. If we had 16 Amtran buses that we could just run secondary with, you see what I'm saying? To get the same bang for the buck, you have to have double the the coverage. They can allow us to use 8 buses, and that's where we've maxed it out what they had available. In BG, we're right, and another aspect is, and Frank mentioned it, we have to transport non-public. So and that's just a guaranteed cost to us.
So last 2 or 3 years, elementary started going the entrance, correct?
Yes.
Because they do double run, they didn't do double run before.
Okay, so I have a question. If we're not required to provide transportation, why do we have to transport non-public?
We're
Because
we're required to transport, if we offer it for public students, we're required to offer it for non-pubs.
That's the law, right?
And don't we get higher reimbursement using Amtran?
It's very similar, just different.
So we're required, this is what it confuses me. We're required to transport a kid from Altoona to a school in Hollidaysburg or Tyrone or something like that doesn't make sense to me if it's not within the district.
The law states that we must transport students to 10 miles, 10 physical miles, meaning by roadway, away from our border, not the center of town, but the border. So you go to the closest spot on a highway in our district, and then you can draw the line. Literally, I dealt with this when I was down in Franklin County because it really upset a lot of board members because we would send kids to the Grace Academy. It was a Grace Lutheran or whatever. It was right across the border. And at one point in time, the principal actually called us to complain because we put all the Grace Academy kids on vans. Or we quit putting them on vans with their air conditioning. We put them on a bus. And they were complaining because they were no longer on the air-conditioned vans. Meanwhile, they weren't paying a dime, but they were paying people to house those children in our district because by state law, we had to transport them. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things here that don't sit well with the average person for justifiable reasons. It's, there are times when that transportation law gets manipulated.
Just out of curiosity, do we transport to Greer? We do. Okay. So if a kid has a Hollidaysburg address, but is in Altoona School District, we'd still be required to transport them.
Yeah, so for example, if they were at the top of Frankstown, because that's where the
Yes.
line is, we would be required to transport them to Greer.
Well, that would be actually easier probably than some of our other locations.
But the top of Juniata Gap or something similar to that, yes.
Right. You are correct. And that is by the skin of our geographic teeth. That
I just heard that. I knew we transported to Penmont. I didn't realize that we transported to Greer. It seems pretty far.
it's like 9.95 miles. I mean, and one of the roads that made it possible is where they actually refinished one, and now there's no question the buses don't have any issue. So, but yeah.
So the next,
Oh, Camille, can I have a couple seconds here? I'd like to thank the board for having the hours at Mansion Park, for keeping it open. 3-4 years ago, we were going to close it for the winter, weather permitting. Like right now, I go by there during the day. There's a lot of people walk around inside. Weather permitting, snow, ice, people understand. The swimming pool, I just come back from the swim meet over there. We've had swimmers from this school who's been in the Olympic trials. We have a graduate who, as I speak, is a Coast Guard rescue swimmer, and lifeguards getting certified over here with our program, getting jobs in the area as being lifeguards. So I just want to thanks for, keeping Mansion open, keeping that swimming pool open.
and Kiwanis does the buddy club, or I think they no longer used to do the buddy club and had swim lessons. So a lot of kids learn how to swim.
There's something in the works. There's something in the works as going on, and with Prospect, we'll see what we can do with that.
So,
Say again? Yep. It
there
is
were
open to the
kids out on
public.
it yesterday having some kind of a soccer game, and they were having a ball.
It's dawn to dusk.
So the next slide is just a sort of a review of three major costs that are beyond our control. PACER's difference in what we spend and what we're reimbursed that falls onto the local taxpayer is 5.8 million. This was from these are the 2021 statistics. Special ed, the difference was 9.8, and cyber charter was 4.1. And then the next slide shows we've had these in prior presentations, shows the difference. 17 million is our expenditure, we were reimbursed 11 for special ed. And this gets back into the next slide, please. Special ed gets into our specialized services, and we provide so many additional services and supports for our students. Cost us in 2021, it cost 20.8 million. We were reimbursed just over 11 million. Cyber charter, nothing from the state, and in 2021 we spent $4 million. So it did. I just didn't update that slide, but it did come down.
We are constantly trying to keep control of outside cyber. And our inside cyber is doing phenomenally well. The graduation rate, is it still in the high 90s?
We've not had a student make it through our cyber program and not graduate. So
So any student who
100%
survives,
zero.
any student who is successful in the program and makes it to the end graduates. It's not a situation where we have kids that are credit deficient or otherwise not capable of graduating. And the quality of the program, we continue to ramp it up as we ramp up everything across the district, because it's our diploma. And I think people need to understand that there is a level 1 diploma, which is the diploma you would get from a brick and mortar public school. And then there is a cyber charter school diploma, which is a level 2. You know, every child who graduates from our cyber school receives a level 1 diploma from Altoona High School and the Altoona Area School District. And that carries weight when you're going into the armed forces. Because a level 2 diploma is equivalent of a GED, which means you have to retest when you enlist. You literally have to take the GED again. So our kids who choose to go into the armed forces, whether they're graduating from the brick and mortar or they're graduating from our cyber, have a quality assessed diploma that carries the full weight of the school district in everything they do moving on through life.
For that, for the cyber, it was 4 million for 2021. We know what it's going to be for 21-22.
We have approximately 283 students in outside cyber. The number you're looking at for 2021, I believe, was when we had 400 some kids outside. 320, 330. So you're probably talking it's at least going to be 500,000 less.
So hiring that principal was definitely worth it then.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because the other thing you need to understand with that principal, the principal's running the cyber, and we have, 400 kids in our cyber program or 500?
530 kids in our cyber, 39 kids in our alternative ed programs, 12 in our special ed program in the same.
In the pause.
Correct.
That's great. So when you think about the all-inclusive-ness, that building is it's a revenue generator, as in a revenue canceller. It cancels expenses for us across the board. The cyber savings is huge. I don't want to use the word all ed, but the alternatives to traditional brick and mortar educational opportunities that are run through the Success Program and the Pause Program and our Kimmel Program are, first of all, they are meeting kids where they need to be met and giving them what they need. And at the same time, it's coming in at a lot lower expense to the district than it would be if we had to send those kids elsewhere.
We've also started re-enrolling students from outside school districts in our AADY program. We currently have 2 students from Hollidaysburg paying a daily rate of $110 per day.
And then how about the stipends that we were given some of the principals? Does that end after
That
this year?
that will end after this year, and we'll talk further, but mention it now.
We would like to put it all into the auspice of the principal there and make that a full principal position because of the responsibilities and how it's structured. And obviously, we've seen the success.
And the reality is if that principal can even attract 1 student back from an outside cyber school, that pays for that full year in and of itself. And I can tell you, he does amazing work in terms of when we get notified by the business office that we have an enrollee at an outside cyber, or if we have kids that we're getting attendance notifications, he is on the phone with those families, with the holding them accountable for those students being enrolled and us paying those bills. We've got numerous students who've returned to us that we get 90, 100 days that they've not attended in the outside cyber, and we do not let up. We call and question them, what are we paying for? How did you educate that child if they missed 100 days out of 105 days? Why did it take 105 days for you to notify us? We're all over. I mean, and I think a lot of people that are looking for something realize that we have a better product to offer right here with better supports. And obviously we're doing it at a fraction of the cost it would cost us if they were at an outside cyber.
So somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Outside cyber is 50% graduation rate?
Or lower.
Or lower. This is going by the PSBA. So this is a couple years ago or lower. Thank you.
I can tell you that their state testing rates in terms of pass fail are significantly lower than state average. And they're some of the lowest in the state when you look up performance on an annual basis of public school districts in the state of Pennsylvania.
Last week, we had a meeting on attendance and dealing with attendance policies and how we could work together as a community. What was funny was cyber charters came up, and the problem was generated from an accountability standpoint, how they don't have the leverage and how they take the leverage away from the brick and mortar public schools to ensure kids get what they need. I do know there are some discussions about cyber reform. I am not as naive as I was 4 years ago as whether we're going to see anything happen there. But the reality is, the parent sends their child to us. Their child's opportunities and chances for success are significantly higher. I mean, we have our graduation rate's 85, 86%, almost right up with the state average. Our oversight for kids and to ensure that they are either college or career ready is significant, and we are seeing the impacts, let alone the opportunities we have for these kids to get experience and exposure to new fields and new opportunities that are out there in the current marketplace, whether it's the biomed, the robotics, the computer programming and those kinds of things. There's a lot of opportunities, and we're making sure that they're able and ready to be able to compete in those areas.
The other piece is homeschool associations are coaching their groups to enroll their students in outside cyber to be able to get the free curriculum that is offered. So where we used to have 100 students that were homeschooled within the school district, that number is probably a third now. Well, those kids are still there. They're just now cyber school students. So they're not counting as homeschool students. They're counting as outside cyber school students at whatever rate that's costing us to provide that curriculum to them. Now, we still offer our own in-house curriculum, resource materials, and everything else, but more and more they're opting for a digital option because they get the device, they get the technology support. We just are trying to attract them to our cyber school so that we hold kids accountable. And that is not always well received in terms of attendance and or academics. So that becomes a challenge for a lot of people because they know if they go to the in-house cyber program that they will be held accountable and there are ramifications. They can't just run and hide. So that's become one of the nuances as well is homeschool students now becoming your additional outside cyber school students.
So is our in-house cyber school students, are they eligible for the CTC?
We have a number of students that are, in fact, I know Ms. Fliegel's secretary's grandchildren. They are cyber students, but they also attend the CTC. Our agreement with them works out really well to where we can provide their core area subjects, and then they're providing the intensive program for those students. We're estimating we're going to have probably 450 to 475 students enrolled in the 27 programs at the CTC next year.
The issue with the cyber schools is the state regs are not the same for them as they are for us. And they're playing on a different set of rules as far as what they have to do and what they're required to do. And there is a big question about oversight. Literally, I know that school districts have called and asked certain cyber schools, CCA in particular, certain questions about what their budget is and what they're spending for this, that, or the other thing, and they're told, we're a private organization, we don't have to share that information. The realities are, as far as transparency goes, we have very little control over what cyber schools do inside their programs and or very, very little insight into that, because we have issues where they'll try to say, Johnny lives at 1400 Broad. Meanwhile, Johnny lives in Lawrenceville and they don't pursue that. We have reached the point where whenever we have a cyber school student, the first thing we do is residence check.
We had a student that was considered homeless living under a court order arrangement in Tyrone School District, so they were still our responsibility. We found out third month into the school year that student was actually relocated to Kerwinsville with his father and had been there since the middle of summer. And we fought that and were able to get those basically relief from tuition. And that was, turned on Kerwinsville. However, if they don't do their due diligence and do an address verification, which they do not, that we can wind up paying for a student that doesn't even live in our school district for years at a time. We ran into that with a kid that was in McKeesport for 2 years before we caught up to that student. We were being billed for a student that hadn't lived here in 2 years. Doc has our police services going out and checking every address of every kid that we're getting billed for. And we're putting eyes on families and students to make sure that they are actually living in our school district. Probably more in the fact that we have our own successful in-house cyber relieves some of that, yes. The charter lobby is very wealthy. Their pockets are full.
I'm a resident of Altoona, $4.1 million. My school district's thrown away for cyber that's not being cited by the state.
What's our projected deficit? 5.6?
5.6.
Well, understand if it wasn't for cyber, that projected deficit would be 1.5.
The cyber is an unfunded mandate. There's something has to be done, and every year at this time, we complain. We don't have enough money, this is being spent there, 4.1 cyber, retirement. We talked about it in, March and April, and May, and then after that, it's done. You don't hear anything about it, we just accept it, and that's wrong on our part.
Well, I have a conversation every time I meet with Representative Lou Schmidt, and this is a staple of that conversation every time. And he agrees. The thing is to get someone to move legislation. We may see some legislation coming out of the legislature this year, but the question then will be what happens to it when it gets to the Senate. But
Can we ever have an audience with like Lou and Judy Ward, like as a board? I mean, no disrespect to you and you represent us, but we all have resided in this community forever, know these people really well, and bring the power of all the people who sort of supported us to be elected to this board. And I think, you know, if I would like to have an audience with them where we could talk about this stuff. I'd like to hear why can't one of our local legislators lead legislation to correct some of this stuff? What does the PSBA do? I mean, the lobbying on behalf, I don't know what your organization is, but the people who represent the school boards, it's weak.
I am signed up for the next advocacy day.
I mean, the answers to all this, you know, I mean, we have some responsibilities locally, but I agree with Dave and Chris, it falls in the seat of these state legislators. All these unfunded mandates, they have to answer to them. Somebody has to do something about this. So I would hope at some point we could have an executive session maybe and invite them, and we can air our grievances with them and see what they're willing to do about it. I don't want to be part of a board that is, 3 years from now facing distressed school status. I don't want that on, on my resume, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility if things don't change. Thanks.
Exactly.
There's a school down the road heading east. They're losing $9 million a year. That's a shame. That's a dirt shame.
Well, I'm sure we wouldn't be the only school board that would want to meet with them either. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of boards have a problem with it because they're all paying a lot of money.
Well, it's.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I'm sure.
I think we should, I have a good relationship with them, so I think we should unite as a board and say, hey, what can you do for us?
No, I agree, but I'm just saying, I'm sure Holiday Bird would want to meet with them too, and possibly Bella and Tyrone, they represent all of these areas.
Maybe perhaps use our auditorium. Invite some of these other schools, and we've got the room in there.
Well, I can call Lou Schmidt and I can talk about setting something up, and I'm sure that he as our legislator would be more than willing to stop in, and I could do the same for Judy. I think just having a discussion where she could hear the concerns of the board and he could hear the concerns of the board could have a positive impact. I will look into that and I'll get back to the board on that.
Yeah, thank you, because I know both of them and they're tremendous people, and I know they have the best interest of the community at heart, but they have a million things going on, and we got to make some noise with them so it rises to the top of their agenda, or we're going to be doing this every year, and I think we have enough time now that if we could have a voice with them and maybe one of them leads some legislation, it's worth a shot, because we can't sit here and then have the same conversation next year without having at least spoken to them.
I understand. We can put that together. Okay, next slide. Question was asked about distress status. Can you want to walk through this, Camilla?
Sue did all the research on this. She's going to take this next set of slides.
You want to walk us through that, Susan?
Yeah, so I researched the districts that are in financial recovery and financial watch status are listed on the Pennsylvania Department of Education website. So I was able to go in and read their statements of declaration and determination. And these are some of the key statements that were in those documents. So one of the first points is that the districts were delinquent in their bills. So they had not paid their vendors and they were often many months in arrears. Altoona is current on all of its expenditures. We do not have a problem with our bills being in arrears. All of the districts that are in financial recovery or financial watch have requested advances on their basic education funding. Again, Altoona has not requested any advances on our basic education funding. The only time that we really get, we are very lucky now that we continue to have fund balance and don't need to do that. One of the districts that are in financial recovery had to do extreme cuts to their programming. They actually cut their secondary programming. I don't know, it did not say what they did with those students, whether they put them into a cyber environment or what they did. But
That was the Duquesne School District, and they literally, their high school and junior high school students were farmed out between East Allegheny and McKeesport.
Yeah, which is very extreme. The other thing is that their annual debt service payments exceeded their local revenue. So they did not have the funding to be able to pay their debt service payments. Basically, they had to borrow money to pay their monthly expenditures, and they didn't have the local revenue to be able to support that. They did have delinquent tax collections in excess of 10%. And then the other ones, they did not have any savings, of course, to fall back on to be able to cover the bills. On the next slide, some of the recurring key indicators within those districts were their debt service to local income ratios, their delinquent collection rates, and their advance on basic education fundings. I ran through the highlighted ones. It's hard to see on the slide there. I apologize, but Aliquippa, Reading, Steelton High Spire, and Wilkinsburg Borough, those districts are in watch status currently. The others listed on this page are in actually in financial recovery. So you can see the debt to income ratio that those districts that do currently still have debt, a number of them have been in recovery for some time and the state has taken over some of their debt service, which is why it's not showing there. But you can see some of those are upwards of 50% or more. Altoona is currently sitting at a 19% debt to local income ratio. The other thing you can see there is the tax revenue and delinquent collections. Most of those districts have delinquent collection rates well in excess of 10%. Altoona is currently sitting at a 4% delinquent collection rate. Another comparison to the districts that are in distressed or watch status is their tax collections and how they're able to support revenue outside of state and federal funding. So one of the key components that I looked at was the State Tax Equalization Board, the market value of each of those districts. So that's basically the state comes through every year and certifies the market value, basically what you are able to apply tax to within your district. So Altoona sits with an 11.2 equalized mill on our $2 billion worth of market value ratio. So we rank 93rd in the state for equalization or for STEB market value. So of the 500 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania, we're in the top 20% of districts for market value. But the equalized mills on that market value were 484th. So we're in the lower 5%, or even, what is that, 2%? Yeah, for the actual taxing on that market value. And real estate taxes, and when we get to a future slide, I'll explain the difference here. Of that 28 million that we do in total tax collection, only 61% of that is real estate taxes. And again, our 6.6% delinquent rate. You can see the districts that are in distressed or watch status, where their equalized mill rates are substantially higher than that of Altoona. as well. And, some of them, the STEM market value is also lower than ours in all except for Harrisburg City. But the rank and equalized mills, they're higher up. They're in the top 20% in the state of applying taxes. And that's a necessity of being in that distressed and that watch status. If you go to the next slide.
Hang on one second, Susan.
Yes.
So what you're saying is, out of the 496 school districts in the state, our taxes rank 484th on equalized mills.
Correct.
Meanwhile, the distressed status districts, Harrisburg, their mill rank is 67. And Reading's 113. Penn Hills is 8th. And their real estate tax is 81% of their revenue, local revenue. Chester Upland's 313, so they're only 170 higher than we are. Wilkinsburg Borough is 9th. Stowe Rocks is 69th. Aliquippa is 101st. Stilton High Spire is 34th. Duquesne City is 211th. And wow, that's huge. Just want to point that out, because when people talk about us, about our taxes and our tax burdens and how we're handling it, the district prior to my being here and through my tenure, we have been reasonably strong with what we're doing.
So I took that one step further. On the next slide, it shows a comparison of the Altoona Area School District with other districts throughout the state of Pennsylvania that have similar market values to Altoona. So I think I ran this from 2.4 billion to 2.7 billion. And these are the districts, of course, ranked by market value. But if you look at the equalized mills of Altoona compared to those other districts that are within the same market value ratio as Altoona, our equalized millage rate, which is basically the taxes collected divided by the market value, ours is the lowest in this grouping. So again, we rank 484th out of 500 school districts. And the lowest ranking of these that are here. And to Dr. Pretel's point, the majority of those, their revenue comes from real estate tax. So their property owners within their school district are bearing the greatest burden there. The next slide shows the same comparison with districts in Blair County. So Blair County is very fortunate that with equalized mills, Blair County is consistently one of the lowest in the state. So we all rank within the lower 100 in Blair County. So the people within Blair County enjoy lower tax rates than many of the other property owners throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Altoona continues to be lower in Blair County. And again, our real estate taxes are lower as a percentage. Now, I've alluded to the fact that there's various factors that compose local tax revenue. So real estate, as I've indicated, is a little over 60% of our local tax revenue. We also have Act 511 taxes. So that is business privilege tax, mercantile tax, amusement tax, earned income tax, and then the per capita flat rate and local services tax. Mr. Ha, I looked it up while we were in between. 138,000 for local services tax is our revenue. Other local tax revenue includes athletic ticket sales, student registration fees, other student fees, and then the IDEA funding runs also through our local tax revenue. a key component to think about as you're looking at local taxes. Over a 5-year period, we've had a 7.46% increase in our Act 511 tax revenue. So our businesses have generated, our local wage earners, all those people have provided the school districts with 7.6% increase in revenue over the past 5 years. Over that same time period, we've only seen a 9.8% increase in real estate tax revenue, while we've increased real estate taxes by 11.3%. So we have had, over that same time period, a 2.3% decline in our assessed value. So that decrease in assessed value of our real estate properties has meant that even though the board has taken the action to raise real estate taxes, it hasn't projected the revenue we had hoped because the assessed value within the district has declined over that same time period. Any questions about that before I flip to the next? Yes.
Oh, yes, I have one. I know we raised taxes last year. What did it come out to? Like $22 for a for a household. I think it was under 150,000. Nobody likes to raise taxes. We talked to some administration in here. We were against it. COVID hit. Gas doubled. Diesel fuel doubled. Wood products tripled. New car prices went up like 30,000. It's like we either had to do that or cut kids' programs, and we decided we did not want to hurt the kids because we're here for the kids. So just to be on record, we had to do what we had to do, and it was $22. So that pulled us out of the hole.
Well, and I think the next slide is very important to that point as well, is the district for years has been very fortunate that boards way before any of us, or at least way before me, utilized all the Act 511 taxes. So even though we've had to raise real estate taxes, we have other sources of revenue within the school district that are helping bear that burden. So you can see that we've had those taxes, the mercantile, the business privilege, those types of taxes, although we don't want to tax our businesses so they don't come here either, we've got to find that happy balance between asking our businesses to bear that burden and asking our real estate owners to bear that burden. But the Act 511 have gone from 9.3 million in 2017-18 to just over 10 million. And you can see the up and down that COVID caused within that time frame. And then just the final slide there does show actually what happened to local tax revenues during the pandemic, and also as a result of some of the decreases within our assessed value.
In 2019, 2020, why did the 511 taxes go down so much?
I'm sorry, which year?
2019, 2020.
That near the end of 2020, and some of that was a little bit of timing differences, but that was when the pandemic hit. So a lot of the restaurants closed down, a lot of the stores closed down, so they didn't have that revenue to come in, and people were home, so the earned income taxes were lower.
Okay, so it's $1 million worth of revenue.
Yeah.
Attributed to COVID.
Yes.
Okay.
And then similarly, we had a True. I was right behind you with my takeout box. Yeah.
And so that brings us to the final slide, which is just a summary and a recap. And that previous slide was a good indication. We lost revenue, and these ESSER funds allowed us and are allowing us time to recover from our pandemic losses and We are expecting business privilege and mercantile and earned income tax. We're seeing it. It's rebounding. So those ESSER funds were very important, and I think we've maximized and are maximizing them. Our projected operational deficit still exists, but it's improving, and we will update you with that, with our projections every month. We do recommend cuts and support with additional grant funds of over 400,000, and under Act 1, going to the max would generate 1.5 million. We talked about it being 5.9% is the Act 1 index, but we haven't really quantified on what that would mean. It would be $1.5 million in revenue. So just
One of the factors that offset last year's tax increase was the homestead,
correct.
and you'll find out more about what that is.
Correct.
That's my
And
first thing.
the annual budget, Commonwealth budget seminars start in March. One, I believe, is March 14th is the first one, and Sue and I may attend that. It's going to be live at PASBO, and then the next one will be the following week, but we'll try to catch it the earliest one we can, and we'll report back. And then from tonight, I had a couple of takeaways of things that you had requested. Event workers for all, athletics and athletic expenses. Library space to rent, we'll look into that. The cost of the discount on taxes. The amount for LST Sue just provided to you. Admin cost compared to other districts, and then the cost of and compared to other districts for direct services to students from the salary standpoint. And then trying to set up a meeting to get board members, anyone who's interested, to get something set up with our senator, our local senator and representative. Did I miss anything? Or is there any other information that you need for us to look into for you?
No, the only other thing that I think we as an athletic committee should look at, Val, is holding our games within our school buildings, because right now the games are for 3rd through 5th grade are out at the summit. But if we would hold those within, we could also make the admission on that, which would offset some more costs for athletics. I mean, we're just from these numbers, it's looking like we're generating some revenue from holding the games in our buildings for the 6th and 7th grade league.
Yes.
So I'm thinking if we could hold, the games maybe at Logan, which has a big enough gym, for 3rd through 5th, or some of the games that might
We'll have
be.
we'll have to talk to Phil about how he wants to do that, or how he wants to look at that. I understand that the games we host here in this, like the 6th grade league, yes, it's showing a little bit of a surplus, but at the same time, there are other hidden costs, AKA custodians, et cetera, that are working and cleaning and taking care of those facilities. So at least it's beyond breaking even. We're not losing money when we do it, but at the same time, you're right. We already have overhead to keep these areas clean and up and ready for use. Makes sense to leverage that.
Yeah, what's been going on Sunday at the junior highs? Is that wrestling?
No, Sunday is basketball. That's the 7th grade league. I'm sorry,
Oh, that's
7th grade
Saturday.
Saturday mornings, 6th grade boys and girls. Boys
On
are
Sunday,
early,
okay.
girls are later. Now they don't start till after service time, usually about noon.
Yeah,
So they
'cause
run
I've been seeing
to the early evening. Yes.
Cars there, so,
Mhm.
okay.
Court availability is going to be one of the challenges. I mean, I know that like Logan right now is inundated. Like there's booked, we're booked till 9:30 every night in every gym we have almost. So, I mean, that we'd have to look at that to see if that's feasible, but I think it's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just a thought, sure. To offset some of our athletic costs. I know I get a lot of gripes about the $4 per person admission, but that's what they're charging. I mean, that's what you go to the summit, it's $3 a person, no matter what. You go to the JMC, I think it's And trust me, JMC, they make you, if you play two games on a Sunday, you got to pay for both games. Like if you're back to back, you got to leave and then go back in and pay again. So yeah, they give you I think they give you a 2-game discount, but it's not much. You can go broke going to games.
Okay. Look at it. Okay, that's all the items on the agenda. Anybody have anything else? If not, we are adjourned.